Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this online presentation hosted by Caring Fairly in association with Mental Illness Fellowship of Australia. My name is Hayley Abel and I'm the Strategy and Policy Advisor at Mental Illness Fellowship of Australia, or MIFA for short. We are so pleased to be working with our sector partner Caring Fairly during Schizophrenia Awareness Week 2020 to bring you this webinar about carers' experiences of the COVID-19 outbreak. And we want to thank Caring Fairly for supporting this online symposium that has been organised by Wandel Mental Health. Before I introduce our first speaker, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all meeting today as we join together from various places around the country. And I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. This is a live recorded webinar and you will only be able to hear from our speakers today, who will be muting themselves from time to time. There is a chat box where you can type in any questions you might have, and our speakers will have an opportunity to answer your questions at the end of the presentation in a question and answer session. And we do encourage you to type in any questions or comments that you might have at any time throughout the presentation. So let me begin by introducing your first speaker, Gemma Muir. Gemma is the Advocacy and Campaigns Direct Coordinator for Mind Australia and coordinator of the Caring Fairly campaign. Before working with Mind Australia, Gemma worked in the international development and human rights sector. She has held roles in policy, advocacy and campaigns focused on disability inclusion in low and middle income countries and women's rights in Asia and the Pacific. Gemma is passionate about using strategic messaging and growing grassroots campaigns to build more just and equal societies and in ending stigma and discrimination against marginalised people and communities. Welcome, Gemma, and over to you.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Hayley. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of where I'm joining you from today in Melbourne. So I'm here on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people who may be joining us today. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so if you give me just a sec, I'll get that set up. Oops. Oh, technology. There we go. Can everyone see that all right? Okay. So as Hayley mentioned, I work for Mind Australia and I coordinate the Caring Fairly campaign. So Caring Fairly is a campaigning coalition that Mind coordinates, and it's made up around 30 carer organisations, non-government organisations, peak bodies and carers themselves. We exist to raise awareness and advocate for the rights of Australia's unpaid carers. And for anyone who may not know who an unpaid carer is, when we say that, we're referring to people who provide regular unpaid support to someone, usually a family member or friend, who needs care support due to disability, a health or mental health condition, or frail old age. And so as part of that work, in response to the COVID-19 outbreak in Australia, we developed a survey to see how carers were being impacted by the outbreak across several areas of their lives. The results of the survey really confirmed what a significant impact the outbreak was having on carers, and it's some of these results that I'd like to share with you today. After going through some of the survey results, I'll be joined by Dawn, who is a carer of her adult daughter. Dawn will talk about how the outbreak has impacted on her and her family. We'll then have some time, as Hayley said, for some Q&A, so we can take questions about the survey or Dawn's experiences, and as she said, just pop the questions in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. Okay. All right, the survey. So the survey ran from the 21st of April until the 5th of May this year, and we were able to analyse data from 471 responses. It was a national survey and we had responses from all states and territories across Australia. The survey asked a number of questions about carers' work and income, expenses, health and wellbeing and access to supports and services, and how the COVID-19 outbreak had impacted them across these areas. One of the key areas where carers were impacted by the outbreak was around access to supports and services for themselves and the person they care for, and the amount of time they're now spending on unpaid care. A majority of carers surveyed said they had lost some or all of the supports for the person they care for, and then 47% reported losing supports for themselves. Only 10% said they had received any extra support during the outbreak for themselves or the person they care for. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, almost half of the carers said they had also increased the amount of time they're now spending on unpaid care support. Additionally, the number of carers who provide over 46 hours of care each week has also increased. It's gone from being 27% of carers before the outbreak to now 50% of carers since the outbreak. When people were asked to give us more information on their care responsibilities and access to services, a number of carers mentioned a reduction of formal services or informal support for the person they care for as a key challenge and one of the major reasons why they were now spending more time on care. One carer told us, "My daughter's days during the week were full of various groups and work. She was supported or at work for a total of 35 hours a week. Now, due to COVID-19, she's only 6 hours support a week, and the rest is left to myself and my husband." A lot of carers also told us about the outbreak and how that had impacted on the well-being of the person they care for, and how this was also leading to them needing to spend more time providing unpaid care and support. On top of providing more hours of care, a lot of carers also told us they were providing different types of care now that formerly might have been taken up by a sort of a paid service or a support worker. A carer told us, "I used to get a couple of hours of respite 2 days per week when my son was at school, and my mother would also care for my son for a few hours every couple of weeks to allow my husband and I to have an outing together. This has all stopped due to COVID-19. I've also taken on the role of not only parent and carer, but teacher, speech pathologist, occupational therapist, etc." Another area we asked carers about was their own health and well-being. For the vast majority of carers surveyed, the pandemic had a huge impact on their well-being. A significant majority, or 81% of carers, said that their own mental health had deteriorated since the outbreak started. And 88% had experienced more stress in their role as a carer. Over half said their stress had increased by either a lot or an extreme amount. The increase in caring responsibilities since the outbreak and a lack of respite that we spoke about earlier was the common reason carers gave for the decline in their well-being. Carers told us of their care becoming 24/7 and about losing respite or opportunities to focus on themselves that they may have had before the outbreak. One carer said, "I have not had 1 second child-free in 7 weeks. I have no family, friends, or support workers. I can only shower at 11 p.m. when the children finally go to sleep because they can't be left unsupervised, but the shower often wakes them, so I'm going days without showering. I used to go to the gym for respite, but also to keep strong enough to carry my children and to protect myself. I also usually see a psychologist for support and strategies. This is no longer possible. We tried telehealth, but because my children need constant supervision, it wasn't suitable. I'm in every sense of the word alone." Many carers were also under a lot of financial strain, and this worry was another contributor to their increased levels of stress and deteriorating mental health. This carer has said, "I cannot sleep because I am concerned about money, going over and over numbers to make sure I can cover everything and hold it all together. I also feel stressed because I now have no help or support at home, and I feel like I'm being pulled in many directions." Over a third of the unpaid carers surveyed said they'd lost some or all of their regular income as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. For 37% of carers, they've been forced to work fewer hours because the outbreak had meant they needed to provide extra support to the person or people they care for. And then 22% of carers had to work fewer hours because their employer didn't have enough work for them. A further 10% of carers had lost their jobs entirely. This carer told us that due to the coronavirus, my respite carers could not care for the children because they had to isolate. I've had to resign from my job as I had no care for the children who are both disabled. It's very isolating. I'm unable to sleep as I worry about how I'm going to provide for the children. Due to being on carers payments, I'm not eligible for the $550 supplement payment. This leaves my single parent family $400 a week worse off compared to other single parent families and with children without disabilities. I've had to delay assessments recommended for my son as I can't afford them. It's very stressful and isolating. Not only have carers lost income, but they've also had higher costs since COVID-19. 71% of carers said that they had experienced increased living costs. This included things like groceries, cleaning, and healthcare, which are among the top categories where carers said they had higher costs. 58% of carers also reported now needing to spend more money on supporting the person that they care for, with similar categories like food and cleaning being identified here too. One carer has said that expenses have gone up. I'm unable to go to shops with my immunocompromised kid, so having to pay extra charges on delivery at home. So a lot of financial stress. So these are just a snapshot of some of the key findings we had from the survey. They really paint a picture of the severe impact this crisis has had on carers. But despite this impact, we also know that a lot of carers are often quite invisible and have been frequently left out of government responses. And that brings me to my last slide, and that's what we're going to do with the results and how people can get involved. So these results are a great way for us to continue to raise awareness around the issues carers are facing. Just the other day, we had a story in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald sharing some of these results and a carer's story. So it's great to sort of get that on the agenda in such a big scale. And of course, the results have allowed us to come and talk to you all today. They're also really important evidence base for our advocacy for carers' rights during the pandemic and then beyond. We've already started using them in our advocacy to government and for a campaign we're running right now to get the carer payment increased in line with other government payments during the outbreak. In one of those quotes I shared earlier, one of the carers spoke about how not being eligible for that impact, increase has had an impact on her financially, so that's something we're trying to change. But also Caring Fairly is a grassroots campaign and a really crucial way, in addition to this kind of evidence, for us to get the government and the community to sort of recognise and support carers, is for carers themselves to get involved in the campaign. And we also need allies, so people who may not be carers, but who want to stand alongside carers to advocate for their rights. So if this sounds like you and you want to join the campaign and help us fight for a fairer go for carers, you can join online. Adele has a link she can pop in the chat for you now if you want to check it out. And you can also jump on the website just to know more about Caring Fairly, and of course can ask us questions in the Q&A at the end. So that's it for me. And so, but right now I'm really pleased to be joined by Dawn McBride. So Dawn is a carer of her adult daughter, and she will share some of her experiences of the COVID-19 outbreak with us and what it's been like for her and her family during this time. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Cool. Over to you, Dawn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm a long-time carer. My daughter has paranoid schizophrenia. I also care for my partner who has a physical disability, so I care for two people. Because of this, I'm unable to work full-time, or I haven't worked for now over 14 years. Being a carer at the best of times is a hand-to-mouth existence. As I'm in a relationship, my income is on the married rate. So my daughter actually earns more money than I do. So I kind of feel quite insulted about that, because I have all the responsibility of keeping everything going, and yet I'm undervalued. I get paid less. When someone has something like paranoid schizophrenia, it's quite complex, because where the medications can stabilise the schizophrenia, the paranoid doesn't go away. So you have to, that's something that you really have to work on a daily basis to ensure that she feels safe and that her environment is safe. One of the big things about COVID was that she panicked that we were all going to get it and we were all going to die. This was something I had to really work on with her and ensure her safety. But at the same time, as a carer, I was the one who had to leave the house to get our supplies and so forth, but I couldn't access masks or even hand sanitizer or anything, which I felt put us at greater risk. And not only that, our local supermarket had run out of essential needs that I needed, so that required more time going to find the things that we required, and money. I think the other part of COVID is that where her medication makes her stable, can stabilise the schizophrenia, and fortunately she has been relatively stable during COVID. The side effects from it are quite horrific. She is on very strong medication, and it causes lethargy. She sleeps longer and eats more. She's also diabetic. So my biggest role is actually maintaining her physical health, because if her physical health went down, she wouldn't manage it and it would make my job harder. So in COVID, she spent 5.5 months in hospital last year because of change in medication, and she ended up having a psychotic episode. That's another story in itself. But because of that, we only just got NDIS in place by November. And this was after 2 years of applying, and it didn't really start until February. So for the first time in my life, I started having services. With COVID. It reverted right back to having no services again, and I was back to where I was before she went into hospital last year, which for many years I've had no services whatsoever, and she's had very, very, very limited services, just through the mental health team, and that was all. And one of the reasons why she ended up in hospital was because when they were changing her medication, she didn't have a caseworker who was monitoring her. And I was unaware of the effects, because she was becoming more awake, if you like. And I thought this was a good thing at first, but then it went into a full-blown psychotic episode. So the services came into place, and it was great, actually. For the first time, we had a case manager for her medications. One of her medications is a depot every fortnight, so we had a nurse that came, and on the second fortnight she would have it at the doctor's when she would pick up her other medications. Her medications are highly restricted, so they require a 28-day blood test, and then so it is a 28-day cycle, and we only get a 28-day prescription. When COVID came in, suddenly where we went for the blood test closed down. It took me 3 days to get a blood slip, and I only just managed to get her blood test in time to get her next prescription. The other thing is that she's only had FaceTime with the doctor. So she hasn't, or not FaceTime, phone time actually, because she can't manage FaceTime. We've also had increasing expenses because we've had to increase our internet. Before that, we were basically not very computer literate, any of us, so we've all had to come up to speed with computers and internet. We didn't have Wi-Fi before COVID. So that was another expense. The other thing is that we've had isolation from our family, her brothers, and grandchildren, or her nieces and nephews, which also came to would provide a distraction for us, you know, and would come and help too, just by being there a lot of the time, and, you know, cooking and eating together and things like that. So it's resulted in just the three of us being at home all the time. And in it, with her physical, when she came out of hospital, she'd actually put on another 10 kilos. So she is on the obesity line. And as a diabetic, this is not good. So one of her things in her NDIS plan was gym, for her to have gym membership. However, NDIS in their wisdom gave her a personal trainer, which is really difficult because she needs to establish a relationship with the person before she could work with the person. So she just wanted the gym membership so she could go use the pool and use the facilities. So we ended up with a personal trainer, which was far more expensive and only 10 sessions. Because of COVID, we decided that as she couldn't go to the gym, even use the personal trainer, could that money be converted into gym equipment at home, which would have helped me as well, because keeping physically active in COVID is quite a challenge. And finding activities for her to do each day to keep her so that she doesn't withdraw again into her own room, and to actually keep her active and keep her fit has been very challenging. It's a day-to-day process. So yes, we have incurred more expense. Yes, we have incurred greater challenges and figuring out the health system so that she could get her fortnightly injection, so we could get her 28-day cycle of medication, and also so she didn't put on weight, and so that any more weight, and so that we could keep her diet balanced. She does have very limited concentration, gets very impatient, so it's very hard for her to follow things through. And so I don't really know what else to say, but that's probably my story at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I don't know. That's probably where we're at the moment. I think being a carer actually requires a lot of patience. It requires being able to see things into things, being able to organise things, ensure that the household runs. Yeah, so I've had no support at all through COVID, but however, I must say that Mind has kept in touch with us, and I have had a Mind counsellor ring me, which I've really appreciated. That has been my service.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us. I think we're ready to hand over to question and answer now.
Yeah.
Dawn, while I wait for the questions to come through, it's Adele Beasley here, and apologies, I think there's a bit of background noise that may be coming through. But Dawn, I'm interested in a couple of things, if I may. One, in the survey results, we had a significant amount of people say that their mental health as carers had deteriorated throughout this time. So I was just wondering if you could expand on that from your experiences. And the other question I had, Dawn, if I may, is when you asked the NDIS to convert the gym visits to home equipment, were they agreeable to that?
No. In actual fact, now we're working through, it's another process again, more bureaucracy and red tape. We're working through because when I did Kim's, my daughter's plan, I didn't realise that, well, they actually asked me about how I wanted to service it, how I wanted to manage it, all that sort of stuff. Well, just navigating the NDIS application was hard enough without figuring out where it was going after we were approved. So I didn't realise that we could have it managed by an accountant. If we had had it managed by an accountant, it would have meant that there would have been no problem getting gym equipment, and to actually be able to tweak it to suit Kim, or to suit my daughter more. At the moment, it was like the way it's set up, the way NDIS set it up, and being NDI managed, they only have NDIA approved services, and they actually tweaked her budget in a way that really wasn't appropriate for her. So through Mind, we've got Mind as our service provider. We're actually now applying to have it managed through an accountant, or at least some of the funding managed through an accountant, because basically what's happening is her funding is just sitting there and we can't use it.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks for explaining that. And so we also have another question that's just come through from actually Elise, one of our researchers, who's asked if there's been anything that has helped you cope during this time.
Anything that's what? Help?
Anything that's helped you cope during this time as a carer?
I have to say that the only way that I cope with being a carer is always looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. So in myself, I work on maintaining a positive attitude through it. And I think sometimes, you know, well, I've just got to get on with it and I've got to deal with this and then it's over, you know. I don't actually like dwelling too much on the negative side of things. It just is. That's sort of my way of coping. I think in a lot of ways, we've all become a lot closer because we've really had to rely on each other and we've really had to work together on this, particularly with my partner. So we haven't had the outside distractions. And I think that's a positive. So that's how I keep my mental state. But I have had periods, of course, when I have been extremely stressed and very tired. Probably that's the biggest thing, is that I probably feel more tired now than I did before COVID, when I was finally getting support.
Thank you, Dawn. We have another excellent question from Annie West on the chat, and she was saying that health experts and politicians say that we will be physically distancing for another 12 months until there's a vaccine or treatment. So that information is varied, obviously, across the states. But so what would you like to see the main thing? What is the main thing you would like to see happen to support carers in that time, if we are to continue physically distancing for a significant amount of more time?
If we had to continue with COVID, with the restrictions?
Yes.
What would I like to see to support carers? That's a really difficult one, because if you've got to keep safe distancing, it's really hard anyway to access services, because services come from people. I really think overall that people need to recognise that carers, like, there is no way that I could actually hold down a job. I've got a full-time job, more than a full-time job. I don't get holidays or weekends or anything like that. I can't even plan for a retirement like other people. And I think they really need to recognise that living a hand-to-mouth existence is stressful at the best of times. So I think they could probably help us a bit more financially, so maybe we can access things like gym equipment ourselves and not have to go through all the paperwork of NDIS. I'd be quite happy to buy it myself if I could. Things like that. But I don't know about services, because if we're in social isolation, it's a bit hard. I think, you know, maybe equipment to make our life easier or something. Maybe take the financial stress off us.
Thank you, Dawn. So we have a couple more questions in the chat as well. One to you, another one to you, Dawn, and then there's a question for Gemma. Leslie Rogan has asked, what about the aspect of the clients deteriorating to an extent where they've lost capacity? So I think I think the question is about the impacts of COVID on people who experience mental ill health, to the extent of losing capacity. Do you have any comments on that, Dawn?
That's something that I've really had to work on so she doesn't lose capacity. With schizophrenia, there's two aspects to it. There's a positive when they're psychotic, and there's a negative when they withdraw. And when they withdraw, they go into their room and they become totally uncommunicative and unresponsive. So my role has actually been to keep those negative effects at bay as much as I can, and to monitor her to ensure that she doesn't have a psychotic episode in the process. That would be disastrous during COVID, if that was to occur. So yeah, a big part of my role is monitoring her mental health, and where, if she's spending too much time in the room, to get an activity together, to encourage her to come out to do something or whatever. Or if she's sitting down for too long, or she actually tends to lie down a lot, and to get her up and get her moving so that she doesn't develop other physical health problems. Yeah.
Thank you,
Does that
Dawn.
answer the question? Yeah.
So Gemma, I think there's a question specifically about the Caring Fairly campaign there in the chat, about the specific outcomes and asks of the Caring Fairly campaign.
Yeah, so at the moment during the COVID-19 period, our main focus or really tangible ask is for recipients of the carers payment to get the $550 a fortnight increase to their payment as part of the government's coronavirus supplement, and that's applied to other payments such as the job seeker payment and some of the student payments, and I think the parenting payment. The carers payment and the disability support pension have been excluded from that increase. So we've been doing a bit of advocacy around that for the past maybe couple of months now, trying to get the government to recognise that carers are being financially impacted and they do actually need the extra support at the moment. So that's our main focus during COVID-19, on top of just, I guess, raising some community awareness around carers and the issues they face. We think not many people understand sort of carers and the amount of work they do and contribution they make to families and communities, and to just try and sort of build that understanding of what carers are facing right now. In the longer term, Caring Fairly does advocacy on sort of broader recognition and support for carers, both in terms of government policy and response, but also in community and community awareness raising, and sort of trying to build that sort of grassroots and community support for carers and making sure they're recognised. And that includes things like we're doing a bit of a strategy rejig, but looking at things like there's not currently a national carer strategy, and we think something like that would really help drive some of the momentum and support for carers and sort of put them back on the government's agenda sort of more fully, and will help to make sure that next time things like this happen, carers are given more focus and are less likely to be left behind.
Thank you, Gemma, for explaining that. And as we said earlier, as Gemma said earlier, we've put a link in the chat comments about how people can join the Caring Fairly campaign if they want to. So we encourage everybody to do that who's interested in that. So there is a comment here, and from Felicity Harkness. Saying, I'm a carer. I wondered whether carers could access some of the NDIS funding to compensate financially for the added work of carers, i.e. the work that a carer is doing, that support workers are doing. Dawn, just wondering from your experience accessing the NDIS as a carer, and whether you've had any success in that respect.
Where NDIS works for me as a carer, or it's totally client focused. Had a few problems with NDIS. One of the things that they did was there is absolutely no way my daughter could have jumped through the hoops to get NDIS. Even when we were sitting at the table for the final plan or approval, for the final application with the NDIA person, she would get up from the table and walk away. She really didn't even comprehend what was being said and what we were doing, which made things very difficult. But then NDIS in their wisdom, when they approved her, cut me off as the nominee. So here I was. I haven't reapplied for it. It's another process that I have to go through in order to become a nominee again. On her behalf. Kim is totally unable to manage her NDIS herself, totally unable to. Can't even deal with what's going on at the moment, what we're doing. And she gets sent things and she's supposed to read them and respond, and she doesn't even read them. She says, "Oh, you do it, mummy," so it's sort of like, okay. So I don't know. I can't remember what the question was. I don't know if I'm answering it properly. So what was the question again? Sorry.
No, I think that was good in terms of understanding your experiences as a carer and helping your daughter access NDIS and the reliance that a lot of people experiencing mental ill health have on their families and friends to help them navigate the NDIS, apply for funding, and then actually use supports in their plans.
And it places me in a different position, because as not being her nominee, they will ring her and she doesn't understand what they've said. She can't pass on the message, or she might be half asleep still from her medication. So it's kind of like I'm not getting always the information that I need to act upon.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
On her behalf.
Gemma, there's a question here about the survey data. So when the Caring Fairly survey was being run, did we get a sense of what access to technology was like for carers, both in terms of their skills and confidence to use it, as well as the devices that worked well?
So that's not a question we actually asked, so we don't have a real definitive answer on that. But from some of the qualitative responses that we did get, technology did pop up a few times. So some people mentioned needing to quickly have to upskill with technology when services, either their own supports or most often the people they care for, their services have gone online. They had to then quickly figure out how to do all of that, and also then spend more money on technology. So like Dawn has mentioned, having to increase the amount of your internet plan, or having to go out and buy sort of dongles or laptops or tablets for people to use. And yeah, I think that was one of the main ones. And people then...
Oh, we definitely have had to update technology, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had to learn it as well. I'm still not very good at shopping online, and it's more expensive, and I get quite confused doing it, but I've had to do it a few times now.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. You have to pay for delivery as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're not sure if what you're getting is exactly what you wanted, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it a lot trickier, I think.
Yeah.
We also had people talking about then having to, particularly if they have children that they provide care for, or speaking about then having to take on that special education role and then having to figure out all of that technology. And then some people mentioned in terms of what wasn't working for them. So we had that little quote we used about people not being able to really use telehealth because of their personal circumstances. A few people mentioned things like that. Or they mentioned about the person that they care for not being able to engage because of disability or impairment in some way with sort of video conferencing or telehealth in the same way, because it's just, no matter what, it's not the same experience and it doesn't always work for everyone. So that was another thing that a few people raised as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely been for Kim with telehealth. Yeah, she has great deal of difficulty. She's probably in some respects, not so much in music and things she likes, but in certain parts of technology, she's really behind. She's not operating at what other people at her age, in her age level and generation are by any means. Yeah. So she finds things like that difficult too. And also communicating, she would find this situation difficult to communicate in on a face-to-face. So, yeah, and all her GP and psychiatrist have been over the phone, so they haven't been able to gauge what she's really really like. And her caseworker has also been talking to her over the phone. So she hasn't been properly assessed at all for the whole period of COVID, I don't believe.
So it's the loss of those visual clues that you're talking about, Dawn, when health professionals are working with your daughter.
Yeah, because she hasn't done FaceTime with them. She couldn't, and she didn't want to, so she would only do phone.
Thank you. There's a question here for Gemma in regard to the Caring Fairly campaign and the survey results that you've just shared. So how will these results be provided to decision makers, and what immediate outcomes would you like to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they'll be provided to decision makers, and we've already started sharing them, I guess, in sort of multiple ways. And so once we had some of the early results, we were able to analyse them specifically for people who received the carer payment, and we were then able to use that data, and we contacted key decision makers. So we sent a letter to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Anne Ruston, and then to the opposition and to the Greens. The Greens, we didn't receive response from the government or the opposition, but the Greens used some of that data then in the Senate, because they're also doing some advocacy around getting an increase to the carer payment. We've also been able to use it so far through some of our networks around meetings with various government bodies like the NGOs, and to inform things like the National Mental Health Commission COVID-19 Mental Health Plan, I think it was called, something like that. So we're also trying to inform in that, I guess, that sort of inside way through relationships that we have. But then we're also using it to sort of engage the community and get them to create some groundswell for this issue as well, and sort of add some public pressure. In terms of outcomes, so there's the increase to the carer payment, which is one of the immediate ones that we'd like to see now. And if not an increase to that payment, more financial support to carers, because we know that they are really struggling. And we know that that financial stress is having a real impact on their health and wellbeing as well, which obviously isn't okay. In terms of other outcomes like that, there's little bits and pieces in terms of influencing services and government responses, which we've done through some of the channels I've already mentioned. But then longer term goals, we're sort of getting together and figuring out what else we might want to see based on these results. And we'll have more on that sort of down the track, I think.
That's good, thank you. There's currently, I think we've gone through all the questions in the chat, and so that's so thank you everybody for asking those questions and engaging with the data, and for also being able to talk to Dawn more about her experiences as a carer. And so I suppose another call for any more questions, or Dawn, whether there is anything else that you wanted to add during this time, to talk about your personal experiences as a carer during this time, and how you felt during the COVID experience, and how that's impacted on you personally as well as your family. You've touched on it a little bit, but I thought I'd give you the opportunity to add anything more that you wanted to say.
I don't, it's difficult really to add anything. I think no, I suppose what I would like to see is my daughter better monitored medically, during the COVID, and that probably is my greatest stress, because last year when she went into hospital, she was in hospital for 5.5 months. It was serious, and at that point of time I really was at burnout, and so I've been more mindful this time not to get myself into that situation of burnout. But I miss I've been a 10-pin bowler for years. That's my stress release, knocking down in pins. So I'm in the league, but bowling's shut, so I don't have any outlet at the moment for that stress. So I've had to find it in the garden or somewhere else. But I think being a carer, it's really important to being creative and maintaining a positive attitude, because there's really nothing we can do about it. It just is. We have to get on with it in life, but we have our good times and our bad times like everyone else. But the hardest part is definitely for me living such a hand-to-mouth existence and trying to keep the show on the road. And keeping the bills paid, I got a 20-year-old car, trying to keep a 20-year-old car on the road. I couldn't manage without a car as a carer. I don't have the prospect of being able to go out and buy a new car, things like that. Yeah, that's probably where a lot of my stress is in caring for the people I do, because those are essentials, and keeping the show on the road.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for explaining the impact that financial stress has on wellbeing. I think that's a really important point, and especially throughout this COVID period, and what the impacts are going to be in the long term for obviously carers, but also for the wider population group as well, as we know that that unemployment rates are rising, and there has been a significant amount of people who have lost their jobs during this time. So thank you for explaining that. So I think that's all for the questions, and yes, I suppose I'll hand over to Hayley.
Thank you, ladies. Gemma, thank you very much for presenting information about that survey for all of us to learn about today, and really understand the impact of what it's like for carers right now living through this COVID-19 pandemic. And Dawn, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being courageous and being online with all of us here today, so that we can really get some good insight about what it's like for you at this point in time and your family. So thank you very much for sharing your story with all of us.
No, you're welcome. I hope it does some good for others as well.
Thank you. Well, I think now that we have gone through all the questions, we can bring the webinar to a close. Before we do that, I just want to invite each of you, if you have not yet registered for some of the remaining events that we have as part of this online symposium for Schizophrenia Awareness Week 2020, we would love to invite you to jump online and register for those remaining sessions. The next one is coming up this afternoon, and it's about exploring the relationship between music and mental health. So that should be a really interesting session that we have for you later today. So I want to thank each of you for participating. I'm not quite sure exactly when the webinar will be available. I did see that as a last question there, so I'm sure Wondor will be getting some information out to all of our participants when those links to the webinars are available online. So thank you everyone, and we hope to see you in one of the next webinar sessions. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.